Hello, this is not so much a book review as just trying to introduce you to somebody that you may not have heard of, who I think it's worth hearing of. And her name is Vashti Bunyan. There she is. This book she has just released. It's a very, very new book. It's called Wayward, Just Another Life to Live, and it is absolutely beautiful. And reminiscent in many ways of other things I shall talk about in a second. But you may have heard of Vashti, and that is actually her name, from the album Just Another Diamond Day, which I think came out in the early 2000s. It was re-jiggled with, re-released. It had originally come out a long time previous to that, in the late 60s. Through Joe Boyd being connected to Nick Drake, who she actually tried to work with once, so there's a connection there. So she was connected with Joe Boyd's company, and she did not like the result of what happened to the original version of Just Another Diamond Day at all, because she felt it had been pushed into the bracket of folk because they'd included members of Fairport Convention on the album, and a lot of the arrangements and things were kind of pushing her in that direction, which she never felt she was a folk singer at all. And Vashti was very much, because she was of that era, she started off actually being managed by Andrew Luke Oldham as a kind of what was seen as a replacement for Marianne Faithfull, and the press were very insistent on kind of pushing her in that direction, when she was nothing like Marianne Faithfull at all. And the misogyny and the overriding of Vashti's ideas and what she saw for herself, and her very, very gentle approach to her music was pushed and pulled and put into places that should never have been, and badly recorded in ways that she didn't like. You'd really have to read this book to find out the ins and outs of all of that, but it is very reflective of that time and how women were treated by the men in the industry. Really, she's not at all bitter or vindictive or even regretful of any of that. She just tells it as a story because that's just how the times were and that's what she dealt with. And it was just like everything she came out with just didn't kind of go anywhere. I can relate to this quite a lot. She would work very hard on something and it would just kind of disappear without trace and get lost in the mix and never come out, never be released. And so she gave up that life and went on the road. Well, first of all, she ended up living. You can't really say it was they weren't actually sort of properly dwelling under a rhododendron bush. That's a very romanticised version of it, but her and her partner were kind of living sort of part-time under a bush in a park. I think it's Ravensbourne College in London, and they were turfed off by the by the landowner, and decided to go on the road in an old bread van with a horse that they didn't really know anything about at all, and it was very ill-equipped to do so. And she kind of left her music behind, and this album didn't come until a lot later. Joe Boyd, the producer, saw this as he wanted this album to come out after her journey had finished, as a kind of musical dialogue, a musical journey through her journey, really. And so this didn't come out until the journey itself had finished, and they had ended up on one of the Outer Hebridean Islands. I'm going to mispronounce it, Berenice. In this completely ramshackle place that didn't really actually belong to them, even though they'd paid for it because of the laws of the land there, and they weren't particularly welcomed. But I'm kind of going ahead of myself here. I'm just trying to talk about the cover of her DVD, which even this is not what you think it is, because people seem to think that this was the actual house and these animals were painted on the side of the house. And if you actually look at it and when you hear her describe it, these are paintings. These are paintings that one of their friends, I think it's John James, did and kind of incorporated into the image of the actual house, which is just, I think, the doorway. even the image of Vashti has been superimposed on top of the doorway in nice clean clothes. I think that's her mother's apron, who'd already passed away, and they kind of compiled this cover, which was sort of not. Well, it's not. It's lovely. It's beautiful. It's a lovely thing, but it's not actually what was actually happening. And people just went there and assumed they were going to be able to see the pictures of the lovely paintings of the horses and so forth on the side. The irony of it was that Bess, the black horse there, was never actually able to get onto the island because nobody would bring her across. There was no way of getting her across unless she was swum across with a boat, and nobody would do it for them because the people on the island, some of them were very lovely to them, but most of them didn't really want them to be there. It was a very, very insular community at this particular time in the late 60s, early 70s. I think I've got that time period right. And yes, there's a quote in here I'm just going to read. I'm not going to read very much from this book because it's too complicated for me to keep weighing pages about, but this kind of says it all. They hadn't even got to the island yet. They were still on Skye, where they thought they were going to go and live in Donovan's kind of community on Skye. When they actually got there, there was no room for them, no room at the inn of Donovan's community. And so they were kind of still on Skye at this point. It says, "We stopped one Saturday evening on a patch of grass by a small white church. By Sunday we were told to move, and when we protested, saying our horse needed to rest, and that we were not doing any harm, we were told, darkly, from the church door, 'Animals are low in the dust.' We moved on far away from the church." So there was very much that kind of we free Church of Scotland attitude on the islands at that point. And I can kind of double vouch for this because my friend Jill Smith, whose book The Gypsy Switch, who I have reviewed on this channel, has gone walkabout in that kind of disappearing objects phenomena kind of way. When you want something, it's not there. So I'm only going to be able to show you this Callanish Dance, which was also about her trying to live on an Outer Hebridean island. Bit later on, but still coming up against those problems of the Church of Scotland. So they were kind of not really welcomed at that point in time because of the nature of the place. And the people, Jill Smith herself told me this, she used to tell me many stories. Vashti and her partner were very much wanting to hear about the old ways of the island and very much wanting to live in the old ways of the island, just as Jill had when her and her son Tally got to the Isle of Lewis. And the people there didn't want to live in the old ways of the island. They wanted central heating, they wanted the electricity, and Jill lived without electricity, and I think they did, Vashti and her partner too. Whereas, you know, the actual native inhabitants of the island really wanted those things to come and for things to be modernised, for the old ways to go. And although Jill and Vashti found people who were women, actually, who were willing to talk about the old ways of the islands, the general ethos was kind of, let's move on from that, and you incomers, you blow-ins are kind of a little bit mad, wanting to drag us back to things that we've fought our way out of. So they weren't. This picture of Vashti is kind of conjures up a beautiful pastoral image that was not quite the reality of that they found on the island. Beautiful as it was, and she ended up not having her first child there, and eventually kind of, well, never going back. And even if you look at the graphics on the top of this CD cover, they just wanted to call her Vashti, and then they realised that she wanted to actually have her whole name on there, so they kind of bunged in Bunyan in just kind of as an afterthought, and then they put this kind of wangy banner thing underneath, and it's all kind of a little bit slapdash. And I can understand that for a long time her work was just not treated particularly well and forced into areas that she didn't really wanted to go into. And for the whole time that she had her children, which was 30 years with them growing up, she didn't sing, she didn't write songs. The songs came on the journey before the children. And then she stopped. She didn't even sing to them, according to the the acknowledgements in the back of the book, she didn't even sing to them as they were growing up. So she really did sort of sing her journey and catalogue her journey in this most beautiful, delicate, pastoral, gentle, wistful songs that are not folk. They're just her. They're just purely her. You would have to hear them. At first, when I listened to this, and I was bought this years ago, I thought, oh, this is really annoying. She's so twee. It's so kind of breathing. But it's not at all. When you actually read about her, this woman is strong and tough and interesting and very unique, and that's just the way she speaks and sings. And it's not, she's not trying to be kind of girly and fey. That's just who she is. And I really highly recommend both of these things to you, because they conjure up something that genuinely is lost. As it says there, it's a magical and transporting memoir. It really does take you to another place, in the same way as Jill Smith's book did. And this one, The Calendar Dance, also does, although this was written a little bit later on. And this, for me, brings up a lot of things about never having lived that life. I mean, the subtitle of this book is Just Another Life to Live, and she said, well, what were you doing? People asked her, what were you doing for those 30 years? And she said, I was just living life. And I feel, in a way, that's what I should have been doing if I'd have been tougher, if I'd have had less insecurities, if I'd had more support, and if I'd made less excuses, perhaps, and just done what I'd want to do. If I'd have been wayward, if I'd have just said, no, I'm doing this, rather than being too worried about what other people were going to think, especially my parents, I would have liked to have done what she did, but I don't think I was tough enough, and I think I would have needed somebody as she did. She had a partner. Most of the time her partner was with her on the journey. There was only just very brief moments when she was on her own, when he was taken into hospital, I think, for a day, and then she had problems with the police taunting her and things like that. So it's not for the faint-hearted, this kind of way of life at all. But it's just marvellous. I wish I could just flick through this. I would suggest that you have a look. What have I done there? Yes, just wanted to show you this. I would suggest you have a look at a video which I'm going to put a link at underneath. It's really hard to get to see this film. It's called From Here to Before, and it's about her. It's about Vashti now, taking you back through the journey, looking at the places as they are now and talking you through it. So that's a really good introduction. I will put a link below this video and hopefully you'll be able to see it, but I think it's a very dubious site that this link comes from. I don't mean you're going to get a virus or anything, because I haven't. I just think it might have dodgy links to it. So yes, try and have a look at it and see. It's a great testament to see her speaking, because she is completely real. She has made 2 albums since, but this is her final one. This is the last album she will ever make. It's called Heart Leap, and that is a most beautiful, I would suggest you look it up, it's a most beautiful painting by her daughter Win. Absolutely stunning painting, and her daughter Win's paintings are absolutely gorgeous. What else can I tell you? Well, it wasn't really a book review in that I'm going to start reading you passages from it. I'm just kind of saying, have you heard of Vashti Bunyan? Bunyan. I find it really hard to say this because sometimes my northern roots come through on my 30 plus years of living in the south, and I kind of don't quite know how to pronounce the letter U. So Bunyan, sort of it goes through the Vashti Bunyan. There you go, that's how I would normally say it. So yes, I would highly recommend it. Who is it published by? White Rabbit, how appropriate. It's just a lovely thing, and put me in mind as well as Jill's work of me talking to you about Valley Myers, another person who just went off and did waywardly whatever she was. And to a less degree, it reminded me of this book as well, The Salt Path, which I'm sure lots of you have read, about the couple's journey around the coastal paths of south of England when they were made homeless. There's a kind of thing in us all that wants to run away, that wants to walk off, and it would be nice to have somewhere to come back to. In the case of these people, they didn't have anywhere, and it was kind of forced upon them. But just that sense of being free, being on the road. When I always say stay free, it has so many meanings, just not only in your soul and your spirit, but for want of a better word, but just that it's kind of something unfulfilled in so many of us, that we didn't do that journey. Do we get too old to do that journey? Do we get too ill to do that journey? Do we get too fearful to do that journey? Have things changed so much? Especially, I'm talking about Britain, I'm talking about the British Isles. Have things changed so much since the days of Vashti's journey and Jill Smith's journeys? Has it changed so much that it would be so much more difficult? We're talking about days here where there was no surveillance, there was it was totally different. It's lovely to open this book and be transported, and it's a beautiful looking book. Look at the papers, little motif. It's just be transported into another realm, and not all of it's good. There was the misogyny, there was the attitudes by people that that they were treated as, even by some of her family, they were treated they'd kind of become pseudo gypsies, tinkers, travellers, whatever, and therefore they were not really allowed in the drawing room, kind of thing. And there is a suggestion that they were only kind of given access to the help that they got because she had a very sweet kind of upper middle class accent, and she doesn't believe that's true at all, but she doesn't know whether it is because she has no other way of speaking. And it's just worth visiting the music. It's worth visiting the documentary that I mentioned. What's it called again? From Here to Before. If you can find it anywhere, or the link that I give you, that would be a treat for you. But she is difficult to hear at first. You have to really strain because she's very, I don't know whether she's just shy or self-effacing, but she doesn't sort of, she's refreshing. She just doesn't glare at you or lecture you or go on. She doesn't like the sound of her own voice. She just says what needs to be said, and her songs are just so pure. I think that's just yes, there's a lot of truth, a lot of beauty in this, and that's why I'm sharing it with you now. And I've spoken for far longer than I thought I was going to be able to. Sorry, this isn't actually a book review as such, but yes, I highly recommend both Just Another Diamond Day and Wayward, Just Another Life to Live to you. And that'll be the end of me for now, or whatever. Okay, lots of love, and stay free in your mind, stay free in your soul, stay free in your heart, and maybe stay free on the land too, if you can. Good luck to you with that. I really, really wish I'd done that, and maybe next time, eh? Bye, lots of love.